Looking for a podcast where you can hear from some great hockey legends, hear them tell some great stories, find out what they're up to today. Well, this is it, my friends. The Domino's Pizza Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Gino Retta. Today's guest, a Stanley Cup champion. Not only a Stanley Cup champion, but a world champion, Olympic gold medalist, one of the first ever members of the Triple Gold Club, one of the greatest Swedes to ever play the game. Join us from Karlstad, Sweden, Håkan Loob. Håkan, my friend, it is so great to reconnect with you. How are you?
Oh, I'm really good. Thanks for having me on. It's just a pleasure from my side. I can assure you that.
This is outstanding. I remember when I first heard your name. It was Calgary Flames general manager Cliff Fletcher in the late 80s was trying to, well, actually it was in the early 80s, was trying to communicate why he drafted this kid from Sweden that not many of us had ever heard of before. And I remember him using the phrase, "You don't know who he is? Well, you better get to know who he is because he's the Wayne Gretzky of Sweden." What was it like to hear that comparison?
Oh, my God. I remember that the first time I came over, the expectations were, really, really high. And I couldn't believe it's because, Wayne Gretzky to me was already, when I came over, the best player on earth. So I was figuring, how am I going to stand up to this? But I guess, scoring a lot of points in the Swedish league that last year I had there, that maybe that's put the stamp on me, so to speak.
We should point this out, though. You were drafted, I think Cliff drafted you in, I think it was 1980. But after he drafted you, you weren't, like, it wasn't like you jumped on a plane and came to Canada, started working out with the Flames and worked your way in. You actually played 3 more years in Sweden. What went into making that decision before you finally came over here to North America?
Well, first of all, we have to understand that not very many Swedes came over to the NHL. So for me being drafted, I didn't even know what that was. I got a letter in my mailbox or in my mail. It just said, "You're drafted by the Calgary Flames." And a couple of weeks later, there was a sweater that came, with number, I think it was number 8 or number 9 on my back, on the back of the sweater, showing that I got drafted in that round. And I didn't care too much about it, because like being drafted, it was not a big thing in Sweden.
Help us to understand that, though. I mean, at that point, again, let's back it up. Then now we're talking 1980, so 40 some years ago. So the people didn't really understand how was the NHL viewed back in Sweden 4 decades ago?
Well, everybody knew that was the best league in the world, but we didn't get to see too much from it. We didn't have, it wasn't on TV, it wasn't broadcasted at all, especially, not on TV or not on radio or anything. I remember my first NHL games when I saw the Stanley Cup finals between the New York Islanders and the Philadelphia Flyers in the early 80s. And, we couldn't believe it, or late 70s, early 80s. Couldn't believe it, the hockey they played. There was, what are they doing? Playing 2 minutes, fighting 2 minutes? What is this all about? But we knew it was a really, really good league. But I think Sweden had something like 15, 17 players to play in the NHL at that time. So not too many, news from the league. So it was kind of a nuisance to us. We didn't know too much about it.
And you had no problem fitting into the league, which, for our listeners who may not know this, you had a great start to your NHL career. You come in here, you step right in. You weren't exactly a teenager at that point. You were, how old were you? Like 22 years old, 21 years old?
23.
23 years
23,
old.
yes.
And you quickly jumped in with 3 straight seasons of 30 goals or 30 goals or more. What was that like for you, where you said all of a sudden, "Hey, I can play in this league"?
Well, when I first came over, I was really worried that I was even going to make the team. We had like 90 guys on the training camp, and I came in and never been at a training camp before. So trying to make the team was just a big issue from the start. So when you finally did that, fortunately I had a really, really good game. With the Flames, we played the Canadian Olympic team, that was put together for the '84 Olympics in Yugoslavia, former Yugoslavia. And we played them. We won 9-5, and I scored 5 goals. And that was kind of the start that I think that the management started believing that I could play. So that's probably why I was in the starting lineup. My first game in Vancouver ever in the NHL, you know, it's a great accomplishment just to make the team. And then all of a sudden, you know, the games got started, you know, and I figured, you know, try to use my strength, try to skate as much as I could. Pretty good vision on the ice, even if it was really a lot smaller than I was used to. And it just came along, you know, with great teammates, and it just pushed. I got scored my first goal in that first game, so it was kind of a really good start for me.
In conversation with IIHF Hockey Hall of Famer Håkan Loob, member of the Triple Goal Club. We're going to get to your accomplishments both with the Stanley Cup and internationally as well in a second. But first, I want to ask you about the crazy year where you set a Flames record with 5 hat tricks in the season, 106 points, most ever by a Swede. You became the first Swede ever to score 50 or more goals. So all of a sudden, you, like you said, you were one of the first couple of dozen Swedes to ever make the journey, to ever play in the NHL. And now you hit the ground running hard with a 50 goal season. What is your memory of the 86, 87, 88 year when all that happened?
Well, lots happened, like you said, you know, it was just something that I think I realized a long time after that what happened was that I found 2 line mates that really fit me so well. And we played together pretty much that whole year. And that was Nieuwendyk and Gary Roberts. So Joe Nieuwendyk, you know, the perfect center for me, you know, he came from college, had more of a European style of playing. And the way we played in the defensive zone it fitted me so perfectly. So all of a sudden, when we found each other, we played so many games together. It was just you know, every time we went out there, we thought we could score a goal, you know, and the way Joey scored, you know, then and later, you know, was just amazing. The touch he had around the net and all that. And Gary Roberts working so hard along the boards, you know, it was a perfect setup. And I think if you ask our coaches that they really loved seeing what we did out there.
Yeah, they did. And you know, I'll tell you, you know who loved the most of what you did out there was the Flames fans. This is a team that never won the Stanley Cup in franchise history, as young as it was. You mentioned Joey Nieuwendyk. You were involved with Joey Nieuwendyk. I think I'd hazard to say the biggest goal in Calgary Flames franchise history, the 1989 Cup Final, Game 6 at the Forum, the old Forum in Montreal, where the Habs had won many, many Stanley Cups. They never, ever watched a visiting team celebrate the Stanley Cup victory on their ice. And you're laughing about this, and I don't blame you, because what moment. Take me back first to that moment where both yourself and Joey Nieuwendyk teed up Lanny McDonald's Stanley Cup winning goal.
Again, you know, it was just sitting here thinking about it, what happened, you know, at the Forum and all that. It's almost unbelievable, you know, the way, you know, we got there and, you know, trying to win the Stanley Cup in Montreal Forum was just, you know, too good to be true. And the game, you know, they were really close, you know, and we were really looking for that to win the Stanley Cup because we lost in 86. So 89, this is our a rematch and come back and try to beat the Montreal. And doing that at the Forum, and it was just amazing. And when you think back, you know, me and Nui found each other, you know, through the years. And then all of a sudden we come up the ice, me putting the puck out of Joey, getting it over to Lanny, and he scores that goal. That was, you know, gives me goosebumps now 40 years later. So 35 years later, it's memories that there was just, they're so strong, especially like you said, when it was in the Montreal Forum, where nobody has won the cup before.
Yeah. What's it like when the seconds tick down and you realize you've done it? I mean, while you didn't know the magnitude of it when you were still playing in Sweden, this was like 6th or 7th season in the NHL. So you understood what it meant to be and how difficult it was to win a Stanley Cup. As the clock starts to tick down and you jump over the boards and you're celebrating, what is that moment like for you?
Well, it's such a rush that you hardly remember things. You know, you have to watch the videos after, which I've done many, many times, you know, but the rush that comes right at you, adrenaline just pumping so hard. it's just amazing. It's the best thing. After becoming a father, of course, it was unbelievable. And then you start to wonder what's going to happen now. What's going to happen when we come to Calgary? We all thought maybe afterwards that we should have won in Calgary, but knowing now that we had a 4.5 hours flight coming back to Calgary, what's going to happen now? Is there going to be a parade and all that? So you start thinking of, is this not only big when you do it at the arena, but what happens afterwards? And you just went along, and just everything that happened after the final whistle, was just, I don't know, it's really hard to explain, but it just also shows the ride all the way through, with all the regular season playoffs, you just feel when that happens, it's just such a high, it's almost like you're the biggest trip you've ever had taken your whole life.
Nowadays, every member of the Stanley Cup winning team gets to take the cup home for a couple of days to celebrate with it. That's become very formalized now, but it wasn't back in your day. Did you get an opportunity to actually bring it back to Sweden to celebrate with it, or how did that go when you went back to Sweden as a Stanley Cup champ?
No, they never let the cup leave the country, so to speak. So it stayed in North America. So which is, we didn't know anything else at that time. So I guess we were okay with it. But now when you see the Swedes bringing it back here, traveling around the country here, to the small cities where the players come from, Ulrik Larsson, brought it to T-shirt, which is 3,500 people in the city. Yeah. So I mean that is just so amazing. They went to his arena, the small arena, and it was just packed. 4,000 people come to watch him and the cup. So that would have been something for me to bring it back home to here to Karlstad and show that. But that wasn't like that at that time. But we had a great time anyway. And the biggest fun we had with the cup was bringing it on the flight back home from Montreal. And maybe there are so many stories what happened with the cup on that plane, but I guess that we save that for another. That's something we can save for another time.
Is there one story that you feel like is PG rated that you could actually share with us? A fun moment with the cup for you?
I think you have to be really careful with that one. So maybe people can try to imagine what went on, what went in the cup.
So here's the deal. Most hockey fans today go, holy mackerel, he must have cashed in big time on the heels of that, because you're coming off a 50-goal season. The next year you win the first Stanley Cup in franchise history. The organization is like, okay, we got to get this guy locked up. And there were offers made to you to lock you up in a long-term deal. And then shortly after that, you decide, that's it. I'm taking my Stanley Cup ring and I'm going back to Sweden. Why? What went into that decision for you? Because you were still at the peak of your career. You actually went back to Sweden and played 7 more seasons in the Swedish Hockey League. What went into the decision for you to say, I'm at the pinnacle, won the Stanley Cup, time to move on?
Well, it didn't really have too much to do with my hockey career. Like you said, I would probably have had about 5, 7, I think, good years in the NHL, after we won the cup. But it was totally different. There was the social part, with my family. I had a young son, 8 years old. We kind of felt that we had to make a decision where he should grow up, what school he should go to, and all that. So I kind of early said that no money in the world is going to stop me to go home or stay in Calgary. So even if I had 6 unbelievable years, it was probably my best 6 hockey years in my career. But it was so many others, like I said, with the social part of the family and the friends back home and all that. So, but I got called an idiot more than once when I made that decision to go home.
But you were making a family decision. And quite frankly, Sweden was so, listen, people are saying I'm proud to be a Canadian, or I'm proud to be Italian, or I'm proud to whatever. You were a proud Swede. You had an opportunity to go out in the pinnacle of your game, play the best hockey of your career, win the Stanley Cup, and then go back and play for your country. I want to take you back to I mentioned you're a member of the Triple Gold Club, which means you won the Stanley Cup World Championship and Olympic gold. 1987 IIHF World Championship. You guys win the gold medal against Russia, and you're lined up the national anthem. And there's a story that's told about you had a little hand gesture to the Russian team on the opposing blue line. Can you tell us what you can tell us about that and what led to that as you were celebrating, looking across on the opposing blue line at the Russians?
Well, I don't think there wasn't a hard gesture or anything like that. But I mean, we have to understand, or people have to understand, how good the Russians were at that time with the national team. It was almost they were unbeatable. I think that before that tournament, I think Sweden had played the Russians 52 times without beating them. I think we tied them once, or Sweden tied them once. So it was kind of, just telling that now here comes Sweden, we can win the gold, we can continue to get better and better. And now we compete with the best. So I don't think that, if I remember right, there was no like ha gestures or we gave it to you, or, giving the old finger or anything like that. It was just, here we are, we're good enough to beat the best. So I think it was just great. And for me personally, I had my so-called worst season in Calgary. I had a lot of problems. I didn't play a lot, so I went home to play that World Championship, trying to get back my confidence and all that. And I had told Cliff that I'm probably not coming back to Calgary, because now my NHL career is just going downhill, because I only scored 44 points that season in Calgary. So, but then anyway, Cliff, he really convinced me to come back and get a new start and all that. And the rest is history, I guess.
Yeah, no kidding. You go on to win the first Stanley Cup in franchise history, the Calgary Flames. We're in conversation with Håkan Loob. So you've got you won the World Championships with Sweden. You win the Stanley Cup with the Calgary Flames. Then in 1994, your second round of the Olympics, you're in Lillehammer. It's Canada, Sweden. Just to remind our audience, in the gold medal game, 2-2 at the end of regulation, 2-2 at the end of overtime, and now you're going to a shootout. What were your record? We'll get to the shootout in a second, and the dramatic way that it finished. And you got to go Google the video, because it's insane video, the way this all ended, for those listeners and viewers who haven't seen it. What was it like to be a part of the gold medal game? You talked about how big it was, how important it was for Sweden to beat Russia. But in those days, there were two hockey powers, Russia and Canada. And here were the Swedes. You stepped on Russia at the 87 Worlds, and now you had an opportunity to dethrone Canada at the Olympics. What was that like for you?
I think it was a great build-up, because the we really did have a chance to compete with the better teams. We should know that the NHLers didn't take part of the Olympics at that time, but there were still really, really good players on each team, where it was the Russian team, the Czech team, the Swedish team, or the Canadian team. So, but anyway, it's a great build-up. And if you know the history of the Olympics, there's always the last thing that happens at the Olympics is the hockey game, the hockey finals at the final Sunday. So it was just a great build-up, and the rivalry has kind of been built up against or between Sweden and Canada. So it was a great rival game, with a packed arena, lots of viewers on TV. So it was kind of, I was at the end of my career. I was 34 years old. I was thinking, this is my last chance. And Mats Naslund was there. So there were some older players that said, this is our last chance. And it went to, like you said, to tie in overtime. And now we'll go to penalties, Fortunately, we had some young players, especially one young player that didn't know how to become nervous. That was Peter Forsberg. He was on his early stages on his career, and he was the decisive with Tommy Salo, the goaltender, that flipped the whole coin towards us, and winning that game was just amazing.
Get ready for the game with the Domino's $8.99 mix and match deal. Score big with any medium 2-topping pizza and any 2 items like pastas, stuffed cheesy bread, boneless chicken, or classic chicken wings. Domino's has you covered. Order today from Canada's favorite pizza at domino's.ca. What was that moment like? Take me back to that moment with Forsberg's goal to win the Olympic gold medal.
Well, it went all the 5 first shooters, and then it was tied after 5 shooters. Now you got the sudden death coming in, and so now you have your chance every time you have your penalty shot. And I remember the coach asking me for the second round because I missed him the first time. Are you going to go again? I said, no. I said right away, take Peter Forsberg. He's not nervous. He's going to do something that, and what did he do? He came out and he did something that, well, we've seen it a few times more after that, but it was just an unbelievable penalty shot. So, and then Tommy Solomon made that, and the last save just for us to win it. And it's just, when it's so sudden, just erupting. And on the bench, we had a look at the video now. There's about 10, 15 guys who didn't even want to watch it because they were so nervous. And, well, there was everything on the line. So that's sports, I guess. You want to be on the winning side. If you're on the losing side, it's not a lot of fun being there.
Amazing recollections with Håkan Loob, our dear friend, who joins us from Farstad, Sweden right now, Karlstad, Sweden, where you made your home now for decades since you left the NHL. So now you instantly become, not that you weren't already a legend, a hockey legend in Sweden, but instantly new level, because along with Mats Naslund and Thomas Jansson, you became on that day the first three members of the Triple Goal Club, something that we had never even used the term for before. We had to come up for a term because the whole idea of winning a Stanley Cup, a World Championship, and Olympic gold, like statistically winning any one of those is insane. To be one of only three people in history to have accomplished it at that point, they're now 30 members of that club decades later. But what was it like when you realized I've done everything I can in international and premier hockey around the world? What was that like?
Well, I think you sit down, you're pretty satisfied, what more can you accomplish, and it almost, a few years after that, you look there recalling what have happened in your whole career, you find it almost unbelievable. You're a small guy in both the size-wise, but also in your mind, and you do all this, and you start to remember all the teammates you had since you were small. You played in Sweden, came over to Calgary, played internationally, and then you just realize, Triple Goal Club. I look back now because we didn't know too much about it because you got the three first members. You didn't know where it's going to go. And I figured, a little later, I said, there's going to be a lot of players in this. And now, many, many years later, there's only 30 of us. And I think that just shows how hard it is as a team to win anything, but as an individual too, to be on those kind of teams to accomplish that. So it makes you really, really proud. Winning at the time, whether there was the Stanley Cup or the Olympics, that's huge. But after a while, you become more proud that you're a member of that great bunch of guys.
All right, I got to ask you this question. So you go into the International Ice Hockey Hall of Fame in 1998. In 2012, you go into the Swedish Hockey Hall of Fame. Obviously, those are two obvious entries. What about the Hockey Hall of Fame? Because something we need to point out is over the last years, especially the last few years, especially, there you didn't have a long career in the NHL, but it's not the NHL Hall of Fame. It's the Hockey Hall of Fame. There are a lot of people in the Hockey Hall of Fame for only what they did on the international game. Do you allow yourself to think that, hey, maybe given what I did at the National Hockey League level, given what I did international, because you also played 2 World Junior Championships, you won 2 bronzes there. After all that you accomplished both internationally and at the NHL, to allow yourself sometimes to wonder, will I one day be inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame?
To be honest with you, I never thought of that being put in the Hockey Hall of Fame. I think you didn't mention it. I would have played 5, 6, 7 more years, and being as good as I was the last few years anyway. Then that's a different story. I just look every year now the nominees who get inducted. It's just unbelievable. So I think it's good at that. For me personally, I'm pretty laid back that I don't expect that at all because I know the statutes. I speak to Lanny every now and then, but not about this. But I can see that their choice of players that getting brought in, inducted, that's a little different level, especially when I talk about playing in and at the National Hockey League level.
Yeah, I guess I just kind of look at what you did internationally and say,
Yeah.
you're making a good case for yourself on the international stage as well as on the NHL stage. Something I found, and I've never actually talked to you about this, and I'll be really honest with you, I didn't know this was your background. I always thought you were born and raised a Swede. I thought your family was always from Sweden, but I did some digging. Can you tell our audience how your family ended up in Sweden? Because originally your roots are from Estonia. Tell us that story.
Well, I mean, looking at it today, it's just scary, how what happens in Ukraine and all that, and what happened in 1940. Well, as the Second World War went on, my dad grew up in Estonia, and they were kind of in the midst of things. They were pushed around by the Russians earlier, and then all of a sudden the war came on, and the Germans, if you know a little bit about the Second World War, they were pushing hard to take over those parts of the world, especially Estonia and Latvia and those countries. So they had to flee from Estonia. So they went on a small boat, went across the East Sea, took them, forever to get over, didn't know where they were coming to. And of course, going west, the first country you go, when you go from Estonia, it's going to get across to Sweden. So that's what happened. So in 1944, in August 44, actually 80 years ago, a couple of days ago or a month ago, there was kind of a celebration and freedom thought for me that my dad came over to Sweden, and that's just how the story started. And I figures, you think about it sometimes, if that wouldn't have happened, I wouldn't even be born. So kind of a nice feeling to talk about the freedom and talk about all these refugees that fled to Sweden. Some got sent back and they ended up in Siberia. But fortunately, my dad and his family, they got to stay in Sweden, and they got stationed in Gotland, the island where I grew up. So I'm very lucky that happened.
Mind-boggling to imagine your grandparents in 1944, in the German occupation, getting into a small boat with your dad, who was a child at that point, crossing the Baltic Sea and finding a new home. It's mind-boggling, and I'm so glad for you and your family that you get to celebrate that moment, because you say, if your grandparents hadn't taken that risk, who knows what would have happened with your destiny and your future. Amazing. So back to your hockey career now. In 1996, you retire from the game as a player. You become a GM in the Swedish Hockey League, and you became one of the most successful GMs in Swedish Hockey League history. You managed Farstad to 4 Swedish League championship titles in 11 seasons before you ultimately became the team president. Did you know you had a business mind and a hockey architectural mind as well? Was that always a dream for you, or is that something that kind of came on your lap and all of a sudden there was success and you went, hey, I can do this?
Well, I was pretty, I knew the club Färjestad really, really well, because I played before I left to North America and played with Calgary. So I kind of knew the club a little bit, and I knew a little bit about the development of Swedish hockey, because when I left, we weren't professional players. A lot of the players had work on the side, tried to make the money to pretty much survive or raise a family. So from that, going to North America and going to Calgary, I learned so much about, how you build a team. I didn't even think about it at that time, but talking a lot to Cliff, talking a lot to the coaches, I got to know a little bit, how do you build a team? What should you be thinking about? So when I came back after 6 years and I played another 7 years, as you mentioned, I kind of built within me thinking, how do you build a successful winning team? So I think that was the big push for me when I got the question from the management in Paris when I quit, said, would you be the GM? Would you be our new GM? I didn't hesitate. It took me about 2 days to make a decision, and I stepped in as the lone sole GM of the team. So I got a chance to pretty much build my own team from the very, very start. And because of the experience I had, of course, playing with Färjestad, but the experience I got from playing 6 years in professional North American NHL, and meeting these people, like I said, Cliff Fletcher, Dougie Reisborough, Tom Watt, all these people, Al Coates, all these guys, they were it's so amazing. If you stand and you listen a little bit, then you learn so much. And I think that was the big thing for me, trying to manage a team later in the stages. And fortunately, I was kind of successful right from the start. So my first year, we won the championship right away, 2 years in a row. So it was kind of a big start for me there too.
You're not going to say this because you're too humble to say this, but I will. You're considered one of the pioneers in the modernization of Swedish hockey in terms of making it profitable, not just fun and entertaining and profitable. And you're well known across the European hockey leagues as somebody who really turned the corner. What does that mean to you to know that you did so much to elevate Swedish hockey, not only in its talent, but in order to make it a business, something that could be successful?
Well, again, I used the word proud before, in my playing career. I think this is exactly what I feel about what it's all about, not only to build organizations, but also to get the arenas going. We built a nice arena here in Karlstad, kind of the start of the business part of it. So in 97, 98, that was the first year, that was my second year, but that was the first year that I could go out with my organization in Paris and say, we are now all professional hockey players. Nobody could work anymore. So now we had made it into the business to make money so we could pay the players to fully concentrate on just playing hockey. And that was the big stepping stone, I think, to Swedish hockey, because after that, everybody followed. So now we had a professional league. And as soon as that happened, now we started to talk about what kind of arena should we have. We had old ice rinks, with maybe 3,000 to 5,000 people. And now we wanted to build something bigger. So now we started looking at new arenas. And of course, again, it was, we were copying the NHL. We went over to watch, all the arenas, how they were built. We went, especially to Toronto. We talked to people there. We wanted to find out Ottawa had just built their arena. We wanted to find out what is the business in having an arena at that, the way they were built up. So we kind of copied. We made it a little bit smaller, of course. So we had 8,500 here in Karlstad. But that's where the really big business started. What we were talking, going from just a hot dog to the big meals, to the wine, to the liquor. We had such a flexibility what we were doing business-wise. So that was the start, not only for Paris and Karlstad, but for Swedish hockey. Now we have to do something that we can really, really grow the game of hockey in Sweden.
And you've certainly done that. Håkan, I've appreciated your time here. I want to play a game that we call 5 Fast Facts with you, okay? I'll ask you 5 quick questions, and you give me the first thing that comes to your mind when I ask you the question. You good for that?
Dangerous.
Here we go. It's time now to play 5 Fast Facts with Håkan Loob, a member of the Triple Gold Club, having won the Stanley Cup, the World Championship, and Olympic gold medal. All right, Håkan, here we go. Number 1, who was the best teammate that you ever played with and why?
I would say Joe Nieuwendyk. He was such a great person, but he was a hockey player that fitted me so well on the ice. And like I said, in the dressing room and all that, he was just a likable guy. So I have to put him right on top of my list.
Who was the best coach you ever played for?
Johnson. He taught me so much my years I had with him. He was, to me, was the best teaching coach that I ever had. So no, he is right on top of that list.
Who did you hate playing against the most and why?
I would say I hated playing against Wayne Gretzky because he was so good. We knew every time we stepped out on our first shift, we were down 3-0. He had 2 goals and 1 assist even before he scored that. So I kind of just, when we were there, we had such a great rivalry, and it was just, oh no, now he's out there again. He's out there again. So it was kind of a love-hate feeling.
You played a lot of hockey in the NHL in North American cities and a lot in European cities. What was your favorite hockey city to play in?
I would say that it was Chicago. the old Chicago Stadium just gave me goosebumps every time we were there. That organ that the play that, with the national anthems, it still gives me goosebumps.
And final question, if you hadn't become a professional hockey player, what career do you think you would have gone into instead?
I know to 100% that I would have been a teacher, because I really love that. I love seeing kids grow up. I wanted to help them so much. Even if I was a kid myself, I could see 4 or 5 year younger kids, just hoping that they were going to learn a lot from life or get the education and all that. So I've definitely been a teacher.
5 fast facts with Håkan Loob. Håkan, it has been so great talking to you. I know that when you were done in Sweden in management and stuff, you also took on scouting with the Calgary Flames for a few years up until a couple of years ago. I'm assuming now you're fully retired. Are you enjoying your retirement? Are you enjoying your grandchildren, having some fun right now?
You know what? I really enjoy life. And I'm fortunate enough to have some work with Swedish television too. Not very often, but every now and then the Junior World Championships, I do that, and some other small things. So I'm so happy with my life right now. And I can sit down and I can look back and say, what wonderful things I had, going on in my life, even, when I was a small kid. So I guess that's what everybody should appreciate when they become at least semi-retired.
Couldn't be happier for you, my friend. Håkan, thanks so much for joining us on the Overtime Podcast. It's been great catching up with you, and I'm glad you're doing so well.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me. This is, to me, a great pleasure.
Stanley Cup champion, a member of hockey's Triple Gold Club, Håkan Loob. The Overtime Podcast is proudly presented by Domino's Pizza and Athlete's Care. Whether you're hitting the ice with the team or watching the big game at home, Domino's has you covered. You can score big with medium 2-topping pizzas, pastas, stuffed cheesy bread, boneless chicken, or classic chicken wings with the $8.99 Domino's Mix and Match deal. Any 2 items for only $8.99 each. Grab a couple of game winners from Canada's favorite pizza at domino's.ca. And Athlete's Care. Athlete's Care is proud to be celebrating its 26th year, offering sports medicine services to both elite athletes and the general population who require rehab for a new or chronic injury or pain. Go to where the best go. Athlete's Care Sports Medicine Clinics with 24 locations in the Greater Toronto Area and Ottawa. Hey, if you missed any parts of the show, don't worry. Visit our website at overtimepodcast.ca, where you can both listen and subscribe to future shows. The Domino's Pizza Overtime Podcast can be found on Spotify, iTunes Podcasts, or any of your favorite podcast platforms. As well, please check out and subscribe to our YouTube channel at O-Time Podcast. Until next week, I'm Gino Reddit saying so long, hockey fans, and thanks for joining us on the Domino's Overtime Podcast.